Facciamo l'impasto
We're going to
della
make the focaccia dough. For this dough, we are going to use 1 kilo of Manitoba flour. Manitoba is a variety of wheat which has Canadian origins, and it has a quantity of proteins that's elevated. Generally, it tends to be strong. This is not related to the refining rate, so it can be 0, it can be 0. In this case, the protein quantity in this flour is around 15 grams per 100 grams of product. That would be a W of around 300. So a strong flour. What do we mean that by strong flour? An elevated protein content. 1 kilo of flour. Even here, I want a rising of 24 hours, so I'll just need a little bit of yeast, 3 grams of dry yeast, 700 grams of water, saving some, and 25 grams of oil. I'm going to put them right away. And we're going to go on. Always remember to control the handle before you turn the planetary machine on, so that it is not on an elevated number and it makes the flour go all over the place. This is a very important phase. This is the moment in which I can add the salt. When the dough reaches this consistency, so when it starts clumping up and clinging to the hook, I won't risk to ruin the action of the yeasts with salt, so I'm adding 30 grams of salt. So recap: recipe for focaccia: 1 kilo of strong flour, 700 grams of water, 25 grams of oil, 30 grams of salt. And the water I saved, I'm going to use it to melt the salt. Now I gotta make sure that this water absorbs. So I also play a little bit with the speed. When you make a dough by hand, clearly it is more difficult, but I have to work with this part of the hand, so the fingers part, so that the palm, which is the warmer part, doesn't stick to the dough and doesn't heat it up. If the dough heats up too much, the leavening starts right away, and so the rising will be kind of ruined. So we can say 2 important things about the type of leavening. There are 3 types of leavening: physical, whipped egg white incorporating air inside a compound, and that compound increases in volume. chemical leavening, so using chemical leaveners, baking powder, sodium bicarbonate, piadina, which is a non-leavened type of bread, has those bubbles that are due to the use of sodium bicarbonate, or biological or natural leavening, which is this one, so using either sourdough or indirect doughs, pre-ferment 𝐒𝐵𝐽 Polish, or even indirect method, the brewer's yeast. It is called biological leavening. Biological leavening creates a matter that's alive. If I make a dough destined to a rising in the fridge, that dough must not overheat. So the body temperature, if I make the dough by hand, must be done with water that's very cold, so that the heat of the body doesn't heat up the dough too much. And I need a lot of energy, dynamic. Watch, my planetary gives me without any effort, but by doing it by hand, I need dynamic, I need energy. So I'm finishing my dough. I'm understanding very well when the dough has dried up from the sides of the planetary, of the bowl of the planetary, because they get to be cleaned neatly. See, the sides of the bowl are not sticky anymore. The dough turns and stirs very well now. This dough must be worked, must be closed on the working surface. So I'm going to take just a little bit of flour, also using a scraper. So this dough is at 70% of hydration, so 700 grams of water on 1 kilo flour. Don't worry if it seems sticky. It is right to be so. It is good. The important thing is that we are able to work with it. The more we work with it, the more the dough will absorb the water and will dry, like this. That's why it's important to work with your fingers instead of your palm. And I must be quite quick, and you'll see that the dough will not stick anymore. You can use the help of a scraper like this. After one whole day, 24 hours of rising, the dough is taken out of the fridge, left in its covered container at room temperature, always reminding you that room temperature mustn't be too low, because otherwise the dough won't rise. And we're going to close it, and we're going to give it the second leavening directly on a tray with oil. The oil is very important in this case because It is an element that will, even what's put on a tray and absorbed by the focaccia, can't be too low quality, because as one of my masters said, in the kitchen what you put is what you're going to find later, so the flavor also depends from the ingredients you're using. So let's close the dough. We don't even need to use too much flour. We can even remove the flour from the surface. The more close, the more the air bubble is highlighted. We're going to put this dough directly on the tray. I'm going to spread the surface with oil so that the film that I put on top doesn't stick to the dough, ruining it. So placing, really just placing. I'm not pulling it, because if I pulled it, the dough by growing wouldn't find space. In this way instead, it's going to basically grow with the film. Like this. The dough won't be, like, it will be covered so the surface won't dry. Alternatively, I can always put it in a covered container, adding some flour underneath or oil so that it's easier to detach it. And now second leavening and laying and cooking. This is the focaccia that we're going to spread directly on the tray. Trying to give it a uniform thickness. It has risen perfectly. It will be a very light product because there's a lot of air inside. We're going to add rock salt on the whole surface. Every bite must be the same. And some rosemary leaves to perfume the product. Fresh rosemary, of course. Here now we have a double possibility. If we want the crust of this focaccia more hard, more crunchy, we're going to leave it as it is. If we want it slightly softer, we can use the humidity, the function humidity of the oven, but not to run risks. We're going to make an emulsion of water and oil, and we're going to sprinkle it on the surface of the focaccia. And this is going to bake. 200 degrees, 50% of humidity for half an hour. In 20 minutes, we're going to control it. Focaccia is ready. We're going to unmold it right away, and we're going to put it on a rack because the base mustn't be in contact with a surface, otherwise it softens. See the air bubbles. Let's also control the bottom part. You can see this whiter area. Now it should be cooked by putting the focaccia directly in the oven without a tray. So we're going to give it 5 minutes directly on the rack. The air cavities are nice and developed. The focaccia is soft, beautiful.